During the filming of A Streetcar Named Desire in 1951, Vivien Leigh broke down on set. The crew thought she was just deep in character. They were wrong. What the cameras captured that day wasn't acting. It was a real mental breakdown, one that would haunt Leigh for the rest of her life. This is the story of how Hollywood's most demanding role pushed one of its greatest actresses over the edge. Vivien Leigh was born on November 5, 1913, in a small, beautiful town called Darjeeling in British India. Her parents traveled there from the hot city of Kolkata because they wanted their baby to be born in a cooler, more peaceful place. They chose a lovely home called Shannon Lodge, surrounded by trees and with stunning views of snowy mountains like Everest and Kanchenjunga. It was the kind of setting that seemed almost like a scene from a movie. From the beginning, Vivien's life felt special. Some say she even went to a convent school in Darjeeling for a short time before moving to England with her parents. Growing up in such a unique and colorful place left a deep mark on her, and it's easy to imagine how it shaped her imagination and love for drama. Her love for performing showed itself very early. When she was just 3 years old, Vivien stood in front of her mother's theater group and recited a nursery rhyme, Little Bo Peep. She was confident and charming, even at that young age. Her mother encouraged her love for storytelling, sharing books like Alice in Wonderland and stories by Hans Christian Andersen. By the time Vivien was 6, she was already telling people, "I'm going to be famous." She wasn't joking. Even her classmates believed her, including Maureen O'Sullivan, who would later become famous herself as Jane in the Tarzan movie. When Vivien was 6, her parents sent her to a strict school in England called the Convent of the Sacred Heart. There she learned discipline, waking up early every morning and attending church before school. But her life changed in 1925 when her father decided she should leave school and travel. For 4 years, Vivien lived in places like Paris, San Remo, and Biarritz, soaking in the culture and learning French and Italian. By the time she was 18, she spoke both languages fluently. During these years, her passion for acting grew stronger. While attending school in France, she performed in plays like The Tempest and A Midsummer Night's Dream. Even though these were small school productions, it was clear that Vivien had a natural talent for performing. Vivien was determined to follow her dreams, even if it made her stand out. Her friend Maureen O'Sullivan remembered how Vivien was the only girl in school who took ballet lessons. It was unusual, but Vivien didn't care. She wanted to be different, and she wanted to be great. Around this time, Vivien read a book about Lily Langtry, a famous actress from the 1800s. The story inspired her even more, and when she found out that her friend Maureen was already acting in London, she decided it was time to take action. In 1931, at just 18 years old, Vivien enrolled in the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, in London. This was the first big step toward her dream of becoming an actress. Vivien Leigh was born as Vivien Mary Hartley. Early in her career, she decided to change her name to Vivien Leigh. This wasn't just about a new name. It was about creating a new identity for herself as an actress. Her agent, John Glidden, thought her original name wasn't exciting enough for a star. After rejecting other ideas, she chose Vivien Leigh. This name would soon become famous around the world. Her acting journey began in 1935 with a tiny, uncredited role in Things Are Looking Up. Though the film was part of a series of low-budget British productions and didn't gain much attention, it opened doors for Vivien. That same year, she made her stage debut in The Bash. The play didn't succeed, but it introduced her to producer Sidney Carroll, who saw her potential. He gave her a chance in another play, The Mask of Virtue. This was Vivien's big moment. Her performance amazed audiences and critics. They praised her expressive face and emotional acting, calling her the essence of English girlhood. Suddenly, people started paying attention to her. While Vivien's career was taking off, her personal life was complicated. She was married to a barrister, Herbert Lee Holman, and she had a young child. Balancing her family life and her acting wasn't easy, but she didn't let it stop her. She kept working hard, and soon her name was being talked about all over Britain. By 1937, she was already getting noticed for her role in Fire Over England, where she starred with Laurence Olivier. But her life changed forever when she was cast as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. This wasn't an easy win. For over 2 years, producers searched for the perfect actress to play the fiery and determined Scarlett from Margaret Mitchell's famous novel. Many actresses, including big stars like Bette Davis, auditioned for the role. Leigh, a British actress, didn't seem like an obvious choice for the Southern character, and producer David O. Selznick wasn't convinced at first. But Leigh didn't give up. She traveled traveled to Los Angeles, did a screen test, and amazed director George Cukor with her performance. Her talent and determination won her the role. When the film premiered on December 15, 1939, it became an instant sensation. Audiences loved it, and Leigh's performance as Scarlett stole the show. Critics praised her ability to bring the character to life. Scarlett was bold, complicated, and unforgettable. The movie broke box office records and became one of the biggest hits of all time. At the Academy Awards on February 29, 1940, Leigh made history. She won the Oscar for Best Actress, becoming the first British woman to earn the honor. Her speech was humble and heartfelt. She told everyone, "I am not a film star, I'm an actress," showing how much she cared about her craft. But with fame came new challenges. Leigh found the spotlight overwhelming. She struggled with anxiety and often doubted herself. The public and the press constantly compared her to other actresses, and some critics even questioned if a British actress could really capture the essence of a Southern woman. But her incredible performance silenced the doubters. She brought Scarlett to life with such skill and emotion that no one could imagine the character without her. Meanwhile, when Vivien Leigh met Laurence Olivier in 1936 at London's Old Vic Theatre, it was a moment that changed their lives forever. Olivier was already a big name in theatre, while Leigh was just beginning to make her mark. From the start, there was a spark between them. They were drawn to each other, not just by looks, but by talent and charm. The problem was, both were married. Leigh was with Herbert Lee Holman, a barrister, and Olivier was with actress Jill Esmond, but their connection was too strong to ignore. Soon, their friendship turned into an affair that wasn't just private. It became the talk of everyone around them. People were fascinated by their love story, which unfolded against the backdrop of their rising careers. Olivier admired Leigh's acting from the very beginning. He believed she had the talent to stand beside him as an equal. They began acting together at the Old Vic, performing in plays like Hamlet. The more they worked together, the closer they became, both on and off the stage. Their bond seemed unbreakable. By 1940, both had finalized their divorces. On August 31st, they got married in a small ceremony in California, with just a few close friends like Katharine Hepburn and Ronald Colman in attendance. Their marriage wasn't just about love, it was also a partnership. Together, they became one of the most captivating on-screen pairs of their time. One of their best-known movies was That Hamilton Woman, 1941. In this film, Vivien played Emma Hamilton, and Laurence played Admiral Horatio Nelson. Their real-life romance made their acting feel even more real. The movie came out during World War II, and people loved it because it talked about love and sacrifice, which felt very close to what many were experiencing at the time. Critics praised their acting, and the film was a big hit, especially since Vivien had already become a huge star after winning an Oscar for Gone with the Wind. In 1943, Vivien Leigh and her husband, Laurence Olivier, returned to Britain. That same year, Leigh decided to travel to North Africa to entertain soldiers during the war. She could have taken a Hollywood contract worth $5,000 a week, but chose instead to support the war effort. Her dedication was remarkable, but it came at a cost. Performing for the troops under tough conditions made her sick, and she developed a persistent cough and fevers. The following year, in 1944, doctors found that Leigh had tuberculosis in her left lung. She stayed in the hospital for several weeks and eventually recovered, but her struggles didn't end there. While filming Caesar and Cleopatra in 1945, Leigh became pregnant. Tragically, she suffered a miscarriage, which left her heartbroken. This led to a deep depression. At her lowest point, she had a breakdown, collapsing to the floor in uncontrollable sobs. This was the first clear sign of her bipolar disorder, though it wasn't understood at the time. Olivier later learned to notice the signs. Days of non-stop energy would be followed by deep sadness and sudden, explosive breakdowns. Afterward, Leigh couldn't remember what had happened, but felt ashamed and sorry. By 1946, Leigh was well enough to return to acting. She starred in a London play called The Skin of Our Teeth, which was a big success. But her movies during this time, like Caesar and Cleopatra and Anna Karenina in 1948, didn't do well. Part of the problem was a Hollywood boycott of British films, which hurt their chances of success. In 1947, something wonderful happened. Olivier was knighted for his contributions to theater, and Leigh went with him to Buckingham Palace for the ceremony. From that moment, she became known as Lady Olivier. Even after they divorced, she kept the title socially and was called Vivien, Lady Olivier. Through all her struggles, Leigh's determination and grace remained an inspiration to everyone who knew her. In 1948, Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh went on a 6-month tour of Australia and New Zealand. The goal was to raise money for the Old Vic Theatre, where Olivier had recently joined the board of directors. Olivier played the lead in Richard III, and he and Leigh performed together in The School for Scandal and The Skin of Our Teeth. The tour was a big success, with audiences loving their performances. Leigh had her struggles, dealing with sleepless nights and even falling ill for a week. During that time, her understudy took over. Still, she managed to impress everyone with her charm, especially the press. But behind the scenes, things weren't always smooth. The stress of the tour caused arguments between the couple. Olivier felt overwhelmed by all the responsibilities and became frustrated. One of their biggest fights happened in Christchurch, New Zealand. Leigh's shoes were missing, and she refused to go on stage without them. Olivier lost his temper, shouted at her, and slapped her. Shocked, Leigh slapped him back. Despite the scene, she quickly composed herself, borrowed a pair of shoes, and stepped onto the stage with a smile as if nothing had happened. By the end of the tour, they were both completely exhausted. Olivier joked to a journalist that they were like walking corpses. Later, he admitted that the tour had changed their relationship, saying he felt he had lost Vivien in Australia. Even so, the success of the tour gave them the confidence to perform together again in London's West End. They brought the same plays to the stage, but Leigh insisted on adding Antigone because she wanted to play a serious role in a tragedy. While their on-stage chemistry remained strong, the strain on their personal relationship was becoming harder to hide. Vivien Leigh's performance as Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire in 1949 was one of the most important roles of her career. The play opened in London at the Aldwych Theatre on October 11, and Leigh stepped into a role already famous in America thanks to Jessica Tandy's success on Broadway. Many wondered if she could match or even come close to Tandy's performance, but Leigh made the character her own. She showed Blanche's sadness and struggles so deeply that it felt real. She prepared for the role with care, writing notes to help her understand Blanche's emotions. Every detail mattered to her, and her hard work paid off. But things weren't easy behind the scenes. The play was directed by her husband, Laurence Olivier, and working together caused problems in their marriage. Olivier was a demanding director who wanted things done his way. Leigh, on the other hand, had her own ideas about Blanche. This led to arguments, making their personal life tense while they were under the spotlight. To make things harder, the play's themes, like mental illness and sexuality, caused controversy at the time. The authorities forced them to cut parts of the play, adding more stress to the production. When the play ended, Leigh had performed it over 300 times, but her connection to Blanche didn't stop there. She was cast as Blanche in the 1951 film version, directed by Elia Kazan. At first, the studio wasn't sure about her. They wanted big Hollywood stars like Bette Davis or Ingrid Bergman for the role. Even Kazan wasn't convinced Leigh could do it, thinking she might not have the depth needed for the part. But Leigh proved everyone wrong. However, it came at the cost. Leigh had been battling bipolar disorder for years. Taking on Blanche only made things worse. The character's pain seemed to blend with her own. Leigh once said, "Playing her tipped me into madness." This wasn't just a dramatic statement. It was the truth. She became so involved in Blanche's emotions that it became hard to tell where the character ended and Leigh began. The people around her didn't understand what she was going through. Director Elia Kazan wanted every performance in the film to feel raw and real. He pushed Leigh to dig deep into Blanche's despair, but he didn't realize how fragile she already was. He thought her struggles were just part of her acting process. This left Leigh without the support she needed, and it made separating herself from the character almost impossible. At the same time, Leigh's personal life was falling apart. Her marriage to Laurence Olivier had just ended, leaving her heartbroken. Her bipolar disorder made everything worse. While filming, Leigh began to show signs that she wasn't okay. She forgot lines and sometimes seemed lost or overwhelmed. But instead of seeing these moments as cries for help, people around her thought it was just the pressure of the role. The emotional weight of playing Blanche didn't just affect her during filming. It stayed with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. She couldn't shake off the sadness and chaos of the character. Even in later performances, Leigh struggled. During one stage production, she blanked on her lines and broke down on stage. It was clear the role had left a deep mark on her. Also, Vivien Leigh had a deep fear of breaking mirrors. This wasn't just a mild superstition. It was a belief that shaped her choices, rooted in the age-old idea that breaking a mirror brings 7 years of bad luck. During the filming of Gone with the Wind in 1939, this fear became evident. In one scene, her character had to look into a cracked mirror. Leigh insisted on a stand-in for the shot, convinced that even glancing into a broken mirror could invite misfortune. This unease carried over into her later work, but it became most pronounced in 1951 while filming A Streetcar Named Desire. In the movie, Leigh's character, Blanche Dubois, has a powerful breakdown scene where she smashes a mirror. The moment symbolized Blanche's shattered grip on reality, making it crucial to the film. But for Leigh, the idea of breaking the mirror herself was unthinkable. On the day of the shoot, April 17, 1951, she arrived on set visibly tense. She told director Elia Kazan that she couldn't and wouldn't break the mirror, no matter how important it was for the story. This led to hours of back and forth on set. Kazan tried to persuade her, emphasizing the scene's emotional weight and authenticity. Marlon Brando, her co-star, even joked about breaking the mirror himself, saying he could use some bad luck to balance out all the good. But Leigh was resolute. Breaking a mirror wasn't something she would risk. Not for a film, not for anything. In the end, a compromise was reached. A stuntman would break the mirror while Leigh acted out the emotional buildup and aftermath. The next day, April 18, 1951, stuntman Harvey Parry, a Hollywood veteran, stepped in to handle the task. The set was cleared to minimize distractions, and Parry, dressed as Leigh's character, prepared for the challenging scene. What followed was a long and grueling process. The team went through mirror after mirror, trying to capture the perfect moment of shattering chaos. Each break had to look natural and dramatic, with shards scattering in just the right way. The first few attempts didn't work. The breaks were too neat, too clean. By the seventh attempt, tensions on set were high. Leigh, watching from the sidelines, grew more anxious with every shattered mirror, convinced the growing pile of broken glass was stacking up years of bad luck. Finally, after hours of trial and error, the 11th mirror was the one. It shattered perfectly, with cracks radiating like a web before the pieces fell apart. Kazan declared it a success, and the scene became one of the film's most memorable moments. In the end, the film itself was a massive success. It was nominated for 12 Academy Awards and won 4. 3 of those wins were for acting, which was incredibly rare and wouldn't happen again until Network in 1976. Leigh won her second Academy Award for Best Actress, proving once again that she was one of the greatest talents of her time. Leigh shared this historic moment with her co-stars Marlon Brando, Kim Hunter, and Karl Malden, all of whom delivered brilliant performances. Together, they showed the power of great acting and brought Tennessee Williams' story to life in a way that audiences had never seen before. Vivien Leigh loved the stage more than anything else, even with her success in film. In 1963, at 49 years old, she took on a daring role in the Broadway musical Tovarich, which became one of the highlights of her career. The show opened on March 18, 1963, at the Broadway Theater and marked her first time performing in a musical. It was a bold choice since Leigh had no formal training in singing or dancing. The story, based on a French play, followed Russian aristocrats working as servants in Paris after the Russian Revolution. Leigh played Grand Duchess Tatiana Petrovna, a role that demanded she sing, dance, and speak with a Russian accent. The show ran for 264 performances, a moderate success for Broadway at the time. What made it extraordinary was Leigh's dedication. Despite battling chronic tuberculosis and bipolar disorder, she performed 8 shows a week for nearly 7 months. Her health often left her so drained that she had to be carried to her dressing room after performances. Yet, she kept going, driven by her passion for acting. Critics were amazed at Leigh's transformation from dramatic roles to musical comedy. Her singing and dancing, despite no formal training, impressed everyone. Her hard work paid off when, on April 21, 1963, she won the Tony Award for Best Leading Actress in a Musical, even beating out stars like Barbra Streisand. However, the demanding schedule took a toll on her health. By October 1963, her tuberculosis worsened, forcing her to leave the production. She was replaced first by her understudy, Joan Copeland, and later by Eva Gabor. Leigh's time in Tovarich showed her incredible strength and talent, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. 2 years later, Leigh's final film role came in Ship of Fools, 1965, a movie that reflected her own struggles with aging and fragility. Directed by Stanley Kramer, the story was set on a passenger ship traveling from Mexico to Germany in 1933. Leigh played Mary Treadwell, a divorced woman clinging to her fading beauty and facing the realities of getting older. The role was both emotional and deeply personal for her. Filming began in June 1964 at Columbia Studios in Hollywood. Leigh, now 50, was hesitant to take the role because of her declining health, but Stanley Kramer insisted, knowing she could bring depth to the character. The shoot was tough for Leigh. Her health issues, worsened by years of smoking and drinking, made the long days on set exhausting, yet her professionalism remained unmatched. In one scene, she slapped her co-star Lee Marvin so hard during repeated takes that she left bruises on his face, showing her commitment to realism. When Ship of Fools premiered on July 29, 1965, critics praised Leigh's performance. Her portrayal of Mary Treadwell was raw, heartbreaking, and captivating, with many seeing parallels between the character's struggles and Leigh's own life. The film was a success, earning 8 Academy Award nominations, though Leigh herself did not receive one. Vivien Leigh's life was full of triumphs and challenges. In the 1950s and 1960s, she went through electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, for her struggles with severe depression and bipolar disorder. Back then, ECT was seen as an advanced treatment, but it was harsh and painful. Doctors would pass electric currents through the brain to cause seizures, believing it could help with mental illness. Leigh's first session was in 1953, after she had a breakdown while filming Elephant Walk. These treatments left her shaken and scarred, both physically and mentally. The procedures were done without any anesthesia or muscle relaxants, which caused violent convulsions. Sometimes patients would break bones or lose teeth. Leigh often came out of these sessions confused, with a foggy memory. In one heartbreaking moment, she went on stage to perform in Duel of Angels in 1960, just after an ECT session. Audiences could see burn marks on her temples from the electrodes. Even with all this pain, Leigh kept undergoing the treatments, hoping for relief. Her story took a tragic turn on July 8, 1967. That evening, her husband, Jack Merivale, left her at home while he went to perform in a play. When he returned around midnight, she was asleep. But less than an hour later, he found her collapsed on the floor. Leigh had been fighting tuberculosis for years, and that night, it finally took her life. Her lungs filled with fluid, and she likely collapsed while trying to walk to the bathroom. She was only 53 years old. Her death shocked the world. In London, theaters in the West End turned off their lights for an hour in her honor, showing just how much she meant to the world of theater and film. At the time, she was preparing to return to the stage in a new play, A Delicate Balance. Her death also happened just as MGM was planning to re-release Gone with the Wind, making the news even sadder. Vivien Leigh's talent made her unforgettable. Her role as Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind is still considered one of the best performances in movie history. The film earned her an Oscar for Best Actress and became the highest-grossing film ever when adjusted for inflation. Years later, she won another Oscar for her role as Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire. The playwright, Tennessee Williams, said she brought more to the role than he ever imagined. She was also a star on the stage, winning a Tony Award in 1963 for her role in the musical Tovarich. Her performances in Shakespearean plays also made her stand out, bringing classic works to life for modern audiences. Even after her death, Leigh's legacy has grown. In 1999, she was named one of the greatest actresses of classic Hollywood. Fans are still fascinated by her life, including her struggles with mental health and her marriage to Laurence Olivier. In 2013, her personal diaries and photographs were added to the Victoria and Albert Museum, giving the world a closer look at her life. On what would have been her 100th birthday, retrospectives and exhibitions celebrated her incredible career.